We are back as the Flyers start the, I guess, unofficial second half of the season. Still not quite at the halfway point. It's Jason Martinez, Chris Terrian, and Brian Smith on location in Vancouver. And the break is over. Bundy, as a player, what do you do at the break to recharge and not think about hockey? I imagine that's a little bit more easier said than done.
You know what, Jace? It's a good time to just sit around with family over Christmas and reflect back. Probably had a lot of good reflections for this team the first half of the year. Couple losses heading into the Christmas break, but I think something that stands out a little bit was just to get some rest. It's a well-deserved break, but also to pay attention to what the coach said too. The real meat and potatoes starts now. Like, this is where the second half. So and Torch saying that in the post game last week, I believe it was in one of the games, pretty clear that he knows his other. We do too. In case there's young guys in the team that aren't aware of it, the schedule load is going to get really, really heavy, and the games are going to become a lot heavier. And there's not going to be as much ice. There's not going to be much space on the ice. So those are things to look forward to, and it's a well-deserved break. They've had a surprisingly terrific start to the year and have a lot to be proud of, but they have to get ready to buckle down. If they're a playoff team and they want to prove everybody wrong, they're going to have to really, really buckle down and be ready for what's coming at them.
Bundy, the Flyers have been doing this holiday-type trip for 30 years now. I mean, it's been a mainstay for building reasons here in Philadelphia. But I'm just curious from a player perspective, does that make it easier knowing that every year you're going to do it at this time of year? I mean, there's a lot of guys here that are only in their first couple of years, but the veterans, I mean, I would think it would be a little bit easier knowing that, okay, every year we're coming back from Christmas, we're going to go away for a while, and you kind of know how to deal with it a little bit.
Jason or Brian, I didn't spend a Christmas at post-Christmas in Philadelphia my entire career. I never spent a New Year's. I never spent a New Year's in Philadelphia until 2000 when they had that millennial thing. Where they didn't want teams traveling and stuff that night. So that was it. I don't even know what New Year's in Philly looked like all those years. I was in Vancouver or Calgary or one of those Western Conference towns. So yeah, to answer your question, Smitty, yeah, I do. I actually like the fact that the team knows exactly what the schedule is going to be like. And I think that makes things kind of interesting for teams and certainly gives them more of a prepared schedule. Guys that live out west or stuff will have be able to identify that, and their parents will be able to get to the games.
Bundy, knowing that you're going and this trip every year, is it also good to get right back, snap into the hockey mindset again after a little bit of a break, to get right back on the road with, where you've talked about it, where it's eat, sleep, and drink hockey. The distractions aren't there. The family's not around. You get right back with the boys and right back into the rhythm of it with a road trip.
I love it, and I'll be honest with you. I think it's the best way to get going after Christmas. You're home for a few days. You've gotten, everything done with the kids, if you have kids, and all the stuff that comes around with the holiday season. It's a busy time of year, And to me, there's nothing better than being able to roll as a pro athlete. As a family guy, I love being around. Like, I like being with the kids and having an opportunity to see them. But they're older now, my kids and stuff, and it's a little bit easier. But in terms of players getting out, you pack up on the 27th and you're out the door for 10 days, and all you do is focus on eating, sleeping, and playing hockey. And I think that's really great because that's what you get paid to do. And so in terms of trying to compile wins and compile momentum, I love the fact that they're heading out on the road. And I always loved that too after Christmas.
Was there a command before you left? I want all the decorations down, the tree out, all that when I returned.
You know what? Sometimes it would and sometimes it wouldn't. But you know what? That's the way it goes sometimes.
Bundy, you mentioned it a few minutes ago, and I guess I'll circle back to it. The comments Torts made the other day, and one of them being that in this league, the defense ramps up in the second half of the season and start locking things down. And I just can you put that in layman's perspective as in terms of being a former NHL defenseman, kind of what that means? If it's just a matter of the games mean more, if it's a matter of, okay, now you're in a rhythm after the start of the season, you know what to do. What lends itself to that?
Yeah, well, there is a rhythm to the season, just kind of finding your timing in it. It's a long season, and that's why people always say, you don't get too high with the highs, you don't get too low with the lows, and I think that kind of goes with it. But again, at the same time, there's some guys that are not used to the schedule yet, and you do want to build, and you get experience doing it over time, but you get a situation where you understand what a long season is, and you understand how to kind of put a timing into it yourself. But you do have to have good coaching is also helpful to have in situations like that. But boy, it's long and it's tough and it's arduous, and you have to be prepared for it. And that's why we say the best way that you can handle a long season is just to have experience in doing it.
But Bundy, is it? I heard somebody describe it to me once. Said in the beginning of the year, every 3 to 5 feet of the ice is contested, but when things get really tight in a race and those kind of things, every inch becomes contested on the ice, and everything is just more focused on shutting down the opposition. Plus, you know what the opposition is. You have a book on them. You know what you want to try and accomplish, and everything kind of. We always see scorings up at the beginning of the year, and they go, "Oh, look at all this scoring," and then it comes right back to where it usually is. Is that part of that process of locking down defensively and knowing how you want to kind of mitigate what another team can do?
I think so, and I think it's a lot of it is spacing on the ice. How much room you get, and always hear in like the later games or in playoff games, man, there wasn't a lot of space on the ice.
No
That's
room
because
out there.
yeah, that's because everybody's checking so hard, and everybody's just kind of close the gap, take away time and space on the ice. So that's really the reason why in tight games, people say you get some good goaltending too, but why you see a lot of 2-1 games as you come down the stretch, 3-2. It may be a little bit higher now than what it once was, but at the same time, I do think that it just becomes a lot less space on the ice, and I think that's really the difference in what second half hockey is compared to first half hockey. I think teams try to hold their heads above water. I think teams understand who they are by Christmas if they're good enough to climb back in it. And some teams, I mean, if you look at some teams right now, they're not in a very good predicament at all in terms of where they're at in the standings. Look at Tampa. They're battling. They're a team that should make it, but there's some teams that are there and are going to really have to have a heavy push in the second half. Whereas the Flyers, when you're afforded a good schedule or a good start like that, you can get away with a couple. But again, I implore the team, be ready, be really ready for what's coming, because the second half is going to be a whole lot different than what they just experienced through, the first, whatever it was, 35 odd games.
One of the things too, Monday, before we get to our first break, I want to ask you about Rick Tocchet, because when you talk about the Jack Adams, at the unofficial halfway point of the season, the two guys coaching in this game tonight are going head to head. Are probably both guys are in that conversation. Torts has had a really good year with this Flyers team, instituting a new transition offense, and the record speaks for itself. But Vancouver, on the other side, has really shocked a lot of people. Some people believe it's not sustainable for them. They're scoring a ton of goals. They give up very little. They got good goaltending. They do have some high-end talent. But talk about Rick Tocchet, the man that and why he has done such a good job in Vancouver, because he's really kind of flipped that thing around. And they played here in Philadelphia on October 17th, and he went to the whip really early. A lot of people thought maybe too early, but it's worked out really well for Vancouver thus far.
They're an interesting team. They got a lot of guys, and some people don't know a lot about some of their players. I think one of the big things with Vancouver that's different than they were a couple of years ago, or why they're coming out, is Quinn Hughes. You got that number one defenseman. He's a pretty slick guy in the power play, plays a lot of time. And when you have a defenseman like that, you can do a lot of really interesting things with your lineup. Of course, Pettersson has been terrific. Demko, the goalie, has been great. I mean, since they really caught on. JT Miller, again, remember they gave him that huge contract and everyone was like, what are they doing? But, he's worked out because he's a very good two-way hockey player. And there's other guys there that have stepped up. But Rick Tocchet's a no-nonsense guy. I mean, I played with him for 3 years, I think. He's been a great friend. He's a guy that wants to win. He's won Stanley Cups. Many of them. And I think that it's just a good situation for him to be in Vancouver, to kind of, let a younger type of team know, like, hey, we're going to run things differently. And if you want to win, here's how you do it. They have a lot. They're a team that had to build a little bit through the draft again. They had to get some of their really good key pieces through the draft, and they've done that. They're the number one team, if I'm not mistaken, in the NHL in points right now. is the Vancouver Canucks. And, who would have thought that? If you said after Christmas, Vancouver would be first in the league, I'd be like, come on. Now, I know there's a loss away from that changing overnight, but Tocchet's the type of guy that just doesn't – he won't tolerate anything that's substandard or guys that aren't going to work hard. He's a little bit like Torts in a lot of ways, except, Toc has probably more communicative. He played, like Toc played a lot of years and has a very good rapport with a lot of people across the league. So it's hard to not respect a guy like that. It's hard to not play hard for a guy like that either.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that, he was a hell of a player. Long career, a hell of a player too.
Yeah.
And like you said, he's got some fingers full of rings as well, both as a player and as a coach. So those are all good for Rick Tocchet and the Vancouver Canucks. Going to be a tough opponent tonight. Flyers shut them out in their first home game of the season back on October 17th. It was a 2-0 final. That was Carter Hart. Tonight it'll be Sam Ersson who gets to start. Looks like Hart will get back into the mix coming up tomorrow when the Flyers head to Seattle to take on their former head coach, Dave Hackstall. Let's take our time out here on the pregame show. It's Flyers and Canucks tonight. We're back after this on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network. Flyers return tonight in Vancouver to take on the Canucks as the unofficial second half of the NHL season is set to begin after a little breather and time to catch our breaths. What's been an exciting first 33 games for the Flyers. It's Jason Martinez, Chris Therien, and Brian Smith in Vancouver. And Bundy, let's look back real quick at 2023 because it's been a huge transitional year for the Flyers. I did on the on Flyers Daily kind of the top 5 storylines of 2023. I know you guys did a year in review on Snow the Goalie as well. But really, when I look back on, Torrey Krug saying no, the drafting of Michkov, obviously the dismissal of Chuck Fletcher, Danny Briere, and Keith Jones' ascension, transfer from Dave Scott to Dan Hilferty, return to Couturier. But I think the most significant thing, and this will sound trite the way I say it, is that the center ice logo at Wells Fargo Center is no longer cut in half. It's the revitalization of the franchise identity and the standard for which they operate. And you as a player here, a guy who worked in broadcasting for a long time, that means something. Talk to how much that means to the players, because I think they're way more aware of it than people realize.
They are. Are you talking about the actual logo? Are you really talking about the logo at center ice?
No, that's the symbolic part, but it's really the revitalization of the organization.
I agree, and I misunderstood. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of players in that room that don't really understand the history of the team. There is. That's just a fact. But the people that had enough in them to kind of point it out and point fingers and say, this is just not what this was or what this is. This is what it's never been. There are a lot of missteps taken. And I'm be honest with you guys, I'm done talking about the past. The present and what just happened in the summer is what is important. You know, people that get it, people that understood that there's a culture. When I speak to Dan Hilferty, and I talk to him often, he said it's the most important thing with an organization is to remember its roots and how those were founded and the efforts that it took of multiple people, especially the one guy that did it over the years that brought this organization to glory. In this organization, I'm not gonna lie, it lost a lot of that. It did. In a very short period of time, there was a significant amount of damage that was done. That's take an incredible effort by a lot of people to try to reverse. And if that logo is symbolic to the whole rebuild and the whole look of what once was, then I'm good with it. And I believe in that because the people that are running it now, the voices that are around the team are the right people again. And we went from pure destruction in a short period. I'm pure destruction. We're talking 4,000 or 5,000 people at games wearing bags on their head to now a very slow rise of people returning to the building, appreciating Flyers hockey, appreciating the culture and the history of the past, while also celebrating the present and the future. And that's what is back on display all the time. And I tell people repeatedly, I do it all the time. I love walking through the crowds at the building. I do it every game. I spend as much time with the fans as I can because I think that's also something that needs to be seen. People need to be talking. The fans need to say, hey, we're good. We're going to be okay. But when I walk around there, it brings me great pride again to be as happy and joyous as I am walking around the halls of the Wells Fargo Center or the press box or the balcony. And it's guys like yourselves that I worked with before that I'm proud to be doing it again. And I'm sure you guys feel the exact same way. I've had managers with this team tell me they didn't even know what the hell was going on here for 3 years. Managers in this team that are still here and how proud they are to have a restoration. It didn't take a lot. That was just flipping a switch around saying, hey, we got to get back to what we were. We'll worry about the winning afterwards. The winning will come. But you can never tear down culture the way that happened here. And I'm so proud of the fact that it's been restored. We're lucky to have Danny Jonesy and Dan Hilferty running things.
Well said.
You know, you mentioned the logo, and it's funny. I was looking back. I think I mentioned it to you guys in a recent game. Travis Konechny's first career shorthanded goal came around this time last year, just before Christmas. And, you know, when I went back to look at it, that was the first thing that jumped out at me was, the change in the logo, because that's, you know, obviously the first thing you see on TV sometimes is center ice, but it just felt like so much longer ago than a year. But, you know, that logo was that way for a reason. And, you know, it was the same way for every year of the franchise's history, with the exception of the 50th anniversary year, which had a special logo that needed to go in vertically. But then, you know, again, it's like you said, I think it was symbolic that was, you know, something that was lost in the transition because, you know, the whole history of the team before it, they didn't want a line going through the logo. That's what it came down to.
It's hideous looking with the red line going through it.
and I know everybody else does it, but in Philadelphia, that's not the way it was. And so, again, it was kind of symbolism, if you will, of kind of what wasn't there anymore. And I think it was the first symbol of all of that coming back, we hope, right?
Yeah. And again, the most important thing, guys, is winning. You know, I don't want to talk about all the warm and fluffy. The warm and fluffy is great, and we love it. Imagine how great it'll be with a team that you have a chance to get deep in the playoffs. And I'm not taking any shots at this team. I'm just saying when you look at the team and say, wow, okay, this team can give us a chance every single year to win a cup. And that's the part that really adds the cherry on the top. All the other stuff is great semantics, but it's important semantics. It really, truly is. Mm-hmm. And so the rest will come with their vision, and we hope that those visions are good ones.
Yeah, the standard operating procedure is back on the rails, and that's a big thing. One of the other storylines I had brought up was the return of Sean Couturier. And Bundy, I did a comparison through 30. He's played 31 games this year of the 33. He's missed a couple with, being, banged up a little bit. But when you compare the first 31 this year and the first 31 in the 1920 season where he won the Selke, the similarities are almost insane. In the 1920 season, he had 8 goals. This year, he's got 9 through 31. In that 1920 season, he had 15 assists. This year, he's got 14. Each year, he had 23 points, plus 7 in 1920, plus 5 so far this year. And he's actually playing more time on the ice this year, 1951, compared to 1926 that he played in the 1920 Selke winning year. Getting Couturier back, we had no idea what he was going to be, and I don't know if it's sustainable. I really don't for the remainder of this season. But what they've gotten in the first 31 games is very reminiscent of the Couturier we were so used to prior to missing 21 months.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you. He's been better than I thought he was going to be, far better. Only because I've had bad backs, and again, you don't know with a back, but I was going on my history, and I'll be honest with you, he's responded far better than I could have ever imagined. So, yeah, I mean, when I look at this team, I mean, he's the linchpin, for me in terms of what they get done nightly, I mean, is their record this good without him? I don't think so, because he just covers up so many things on the ice that can hurt you the other way of the offensive side. And I think that's what he brings to the table. He's just so smart, covers a lot of the middle of the ice so well. He detracts plays in the middle of the ice. He's a legit player. And obviously, I mean, right now I'd have to say for where the Flyers are, he'd probably be the leader for the Selke right now. I can't imagine anybody else who's done what he's done with, quite frankly, the guys he has on this team, in terms of the bold look at what everything is. And he's been absolutely remarkable this season. He really has.
And not even just the stuff on the ice, but off the ice as well. And this is another thing that, it doesn't seem significant, but there was a stretch earlier this year. Yegor Zamula was having a little bit of trouble. He was fighting the puck. He'd put a couple of pucks over the glass for delay of game penalties. One day after formal practice was over, Coots pulls him aside. They're on the sheet over at Voorhees, and they're playing catch. They're flipping pucks 20 feet in the air to each other and giving him some reps. And it was, I asked Coots about it afterwards, and he was saying, well, yeah, I mean, it's like if you're a pitcher and you never practice your curveball and you go throw it in game, it's not going to work. But just the fact that he's at the point in his career where he'll take the initiative to work with younger guys like that. Travis Konechny's talked about it too, his effect on him. So, it's not just, I guess, what he personally does, but how he affects the people around him as well. It's great to have him back.
Sure is. He'll be an important player for the Flyers tonight at Vancouver too. They got some pretty good players, and Torts will be battling with that matchup. And Vancouver, if I remember correctly, is an awful place to get a change. Awful. One of the worst in the league. So he'll have his work cut out for him. He might put more energy in trying to get that second period change than he will put more energy into it. But it'll be a good, looking forward to this one coming up here in a few minutes, guys. And it'll be interesting to see how Coots looks in this game tonight, and exactly what the matchups will be on Torts' end, and how he's going to try to at least mitigate those.
Bundy, you talk about the second half, and it's last year the second half was far different than this second half, because it was hockey games that didn't have tremendous meaning in the standings. They're in a tight situation right now in the standings. But the second half of Morgan Frost and Owen Tippett for this team to have success has got to resemble last year when it didn't mean much. Tonight's a big start to the unofficial second half for those two players.
They're going to be counted upon. You need to, you got to find a way to score. And when I look at it, I know, Frost has had a difficult first half in terms of dealing with a lot, but he's going to have to be part of the offense. And if he has the second half he had last year, this team could actually have a good second half. They're going to need the offense. They can't just go out and, and hope someone else scores. They've got to take the bull by the horns and try to turn that puck into some offense while also kind of doing a good job in their own zone. It's tough. It's a tough schedule coming at them, and they're going to have to be ready every single night, starting with the Canucks tonight.
Last thing, Bundy, this knocks out the really heavy travel for the team. You've talked about the wear and tear of playing in other cities, like when you were in Dallas for a short period of time. But the travel when you're hanging out in that Northeast corridor, and the trip to Alberta's in the rear view, a couple of trips to California in the rear view, all that stuff kind of gone. Yeah, they'll go to St. Louis, and they'll have a couple games in another time zone. But for the most part, it's 7 o'clock or matinees in the Northeast corridor on the East Coast. That's a big advantage for them.
It no doubt is. And I think when you look at, because you get to focus on your own home, kind of your own time frame in terms of those games, right? They're all normal start times. Listen, anytime you get in and out of Edmonton really quick is a good thing. Same with Calgary. Smitty's going to laugh any second. But you know what? Yes, Vancouver, beautiful city. I heard Seattle is. Get those 2 Canadian ones done and come on home. And we'll get ready to play some 7 o'clock hockey and 1 o'clock hockey. I love it.
Love it. Perfect. All right. Flyers, Canucks. Stay tuned. Tim Saunders and Todd Fedoruk got the countdown to face-off coming up. We're back after this, though, on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network.